course, the second I hit record, the dog starts barking.
Yeah, the dog.
Fix the damn dog! Been a while since we talked about some Spider-Man jazz. Okay, let's get this one out of the way. Signed everyone from cast and crew, Spider-Man No Way Home, and there's this one signature there where everyone's like, is this Tobey Maguire's signature? I'm pretty sure this is Tobey Maguire's signature. At this point, with everything that's been coming out, I mean, you believe he's in it, right? I believe he's in it, yeah.
The worst kept secret in Hollywood right now.
It seems pretty likely. This report came out a couple days ago, but it seems to have caught a lot of traction today. And it's something that I am very much invested in, so I wanted to talk about it. I believe you are too, considering how, safe to say, both of our favorite Spider-Man is Tobey Maguire.
Yeah.
No offense to the others, we love the others. Tobey Maguire is our personal favorite.
Grew up with him.
So the main rumor is that Spider-Man 4 might actually be happening with Tobey Maguire starring in it, Sam Raimi directing, and that this would take place after Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. So it would be semi-connected just due to events because of that, right? That's like the main rumor circulating. I have my reasons for why I want this Spider-Man 4 to happen, but I also have reasons why realistically it probably will not happen, although I'm hoping I'm wrong about those reasons, all I'm saying. But before diving into any of that, I think it's important to do just a quick recap of what went wrong with Spider-Man 3 and what was supposed to happen with Spider-Man 4, and to see how any of that might actually affect the development of Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi getting a chance to reunite for Spider-Man 4. All right, so for Spider-Man 3, we all pretty much know what happened. He didn't want Venom. He didn't want to get hit with that Venom. He didn't know what hit him. He didn't want Venom in there. As I wear this shirt, in case Sam Raimi's watching this, so he feels provoked by Venom being in this video. He only wanted Sandman in there, and he wanted Harry Osborn to have his arc conclude. And he didn't quite get Venom, and Avi Arad, who is all about that Venom, was like, hey man, you don't get fans. You need to put Venom in here. Clearly what you're doing is not working, Sam Raimi. Put Venom in here.
Punch this thing up and make it more edgy.
That's just the most bizarre part to me, is like, where was this statement coming from of, you're not listening to the fans enough? Did you not see the reception Spider-Man 2 got?
And that wasn't as much of a thing back then. There wasn't the same Twitterverse we have now where people can just go and directly complain to a filmmaker.
And people were also pretty happy with the changes that Sam Raimi was making. You know, letting Sam Raimi do his thing worked for the franchise, and then obviously with the studio meddling, he ended up directing a movie he himself does not like. He's not a fan of the film. Spider-Man 4 was announced, and this movie had one main goal: redemption. Redemption for everything that went wrong for Spider-Man 3. Sam Raimi had a goal in mind of, I gotta just make it what I want it to be, and it has to be the best Spider-Man movie. He will not settle for anything less than great. Like, I'm paraphrasing it, but that's pretty much exactly what he was saying, is that this has to be a great movie. And he had some wild plans for it. First off, he wanted to make sure he wasn't gonna let any bit of Sony influence his decision making on who the villain should be. So he had this idea for the main villain to be Vulture, played by John Malkovich. And then he wanted to have Felicia Hardy be in here, played by Anne Hathaway, and Felicia Hardy, more known as Black Cat. He was actually going to do his own thing and have her arc into Vultress. I don't know if you know about any of this, but in the beginning of the movie, he wanted to do this like montage of Spider-Man apprehending all these villains that he never saw as becoming a main villain in the movies he was doing. People like the Shocker, people like the Prowler, people like not Paul Giamatti Rhino, but the onesie Rhino he wanted to do. And then he had a fun bit in mind for Mysterio, and he wanted Bruce Campbell to play him. So he'd be like this overweight Mysterio. You'd have kind of this fun montage at the beginning, which I imagine nowadays, if that's what he did, I think that would just piss off a lot of fans. Yeah, like what the hell, you're wasting all these villains. Like that's how I think nowadays it would have been, right? I think at the time though, I think we would have had a lot of fun watching that.
Yeah, I mean in a time where you don't have so much pressure to hold on to people just in case we need to make them super important later. And I mean over the years he's expressed interest with that Spider-Man 4 project of even bringing in lesser known villains to the fold and stuff like that. There was a point where they were like, let's make Morbius the living vampire one of the main villains in here. Nowadays it wouldn't work to do like a medley or cram a bunch in. But at the time we were talking about, before superhero movies were the big franchise monoliths they are now, I think that could have been an interesting way to go about it.
I mean, at the end of the day, his main focus was on telling the story of Peter Parker. Focus being Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and Harry Osborn. Like the three main characters, specifically Peter, right? So I think even in doing that with some of your villains at the beginning, I don't think he would have lost sight of wanting to conclude the Peter Parker journey, because that's how this was supposed to be. This should serve as the closing book on his franchise. And if they wanted to negotiate for part 5 or a part 6, then they could talk about it. But this would have been like, in case I wanted to end it, this would be the end. Right? So they had the writer James Vanderbilt on board, but in the middle of production, the script wasn't going the way he wanted it to go. He became very much aware that Sony was already like, hey, maybe we should just reboot this. Eventually, he gave up. Then we got Amazing Spider-Man. That franchise failed. Now we have Tom Holland in the MCU, and that's going. Where are we at right now? First off, I don't think this would be the Spider-Man 4 he was originally envisioning.
No. It's got to be, you know, it's decades removed now, so it's got to be updated and a whole new idea by this point.
And I'm wondering how much, if you were to get permission to do this, if they were going to hand this over to him, like, why would Sony let this happen? Why would they let him do this Spider-Man movie? I think it's because in the amount of time we're talking about Spider-Man 3, the most hype it's been getting is the possibility of, yes, all the Spider-Man joining, but let's face facts. Tobey Maguire is the one that's getting most. I'm not talking about your personal opinion. Let's look at the masses here.
If it was only
Right?
Andrew Garfield, these conversations would be a little different.
But every single time, it's Tobey Maguire. Tobey Maguire's the one that keeps going trending. Obviously, with studios being mainly concerned about money and monetization and all that, clearly they're like, well, damn, it looks like people really want to see more Tobey Maguire already.
Yeah.
I don't even think Tobey Maguire cares to see more Tobey Maguire. Tobey Maguire strikes me as the kind of guy with, you give him the right paycheck, he'll do the right job, you know?
Yeah, that seems fair, especially with what we heard about the negotiations surrounding this movie.
Yeah, I think this would be really cool for him to do, mainly because I think it's really shitty what's happened with him. I think it's especially crappy in the sense of he makes 2 very iconic Spider-Man movies, and then for years and years and years and years, everyone just gives him crap about Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, which is largely dogged by decisions he didn't want to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it makes an interesting case because it does approach a precedent, because you had the Snyder Cut and then you have this idea, and it seems like, you know, Hollywood's a big machine that oftentimes makes decisions that go against filmmakers' wishes, go against what they really wanted in their heart and soul for a film or whatever. So I'm like, at this point, the more we do this, the more of just a thing it's going to become. I'm curious to see what Hollywood does, because like a new genre can't just become the redemption film, can it?
Well, you know, you said Snyder Cut, and to me, that's exactly why I think this would not happen. That's the main reason why. Because I think Sam Raimi would want more control of what he would do. Like, if I'm gonna do this, I have to be able to do it my way. And there is literally nothing about Sony that has demonstrated there's a if this was like Blumhouse maybe, but there's nothing about Sony specifically that has demonstrated that they would let him be like, yeah, I want to do my own thing. Like, I think it would be cool if we did kind of get a Snyder Cut version. Like, I know there's not a version of this film that already exists, but if he was like, yeah, I'm just going to do what I wanted to originally do. I'm going to have my weird opening montage.
Hey, Evil Dead 2 that, where it's like partially a remake of Spider-Man 3, but it's partially its kind of own movie.
Yeah, and I think actually in a weird way, by keeping that original intro that he had in mind, because, you know, scripts, that was still the early development stages of the script. That's just what they had in mind at the beginning, you know? Let's say we went into a time machine and they finally got around to filming it. Maybe that opening montage wouldn't even be there by the time they got around to being on set, right? Point being, you know, even if you do have that opening montage, it would be a good way to establish that, oh, this is definitely not taking over the MCU Spider-Man.
Yeah.
This is like, you got an overweight Bruce Campbell Mysterio right here. This is not the same thing.
Yeah,
this is his own thing. And I feel like out of any franchise currently, more than The Flash, more than Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, more than any franchise, Spider-Man's the one where you I think it's already done, right? They already have it established. Like, they have Into the Spider-Verse. They have the Spider-Man with the Tom Hollands. They got the Venom movie.
I mean, they already have their multiverse. They beat everybody to the multiverse. I feel like Spider-Verse is the door kicking open, you know?
That's my point, is the Spider-Verse movie is already set the precedent for,
There could be any number of Spider-Man
You could do a
series.
Spider-Man 4, and I feel like people would be on board and it wouldn't confuse audiences.
Yeah. Again, the Spider-Verse was such a huge hit that I feel like even the layperson who's aware of that movie might go, oh, maybe this is one of those alternate universe ones, you know?
Yeah, and I think that there's so much trauma and so much burnout that came out with Sam Raimi, and I'm sure there's been stuff that just Tobey Maguire hasn't been vocal about. Of
his back.
His high on his back pain. I'm sure there's experience he's had that he hasn't been vocal about. And same thing with Sam Raimi. You know, like, I think that in order for them to do this, they would need to have as much control as possible over the creative decision making. And I just don't see a scenario where Sony would let that happen. And that's the only reason why I don't think they would proceed with signing contracts to do this movie.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid point.
I love it. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see whatever weird ideas they'd have. The reason I wanted to bring up what went wrong with Spider-Man 3 and the canceled Spider-Man 4 is because how much has really changed.
Not a lot, honestly, and this sounds like what we've seen with WB even recently.
Yeah.
This is studio filmmaking right here, and these are the trials and tribulations.
All right, guys. Well, Spider-Man 4, would you want it to happen? Do you think it would be too confusing? Leave your thoughts down below. You can subscribe to The Real Rejects, click that notification bell, hit that like button. Last but not least,
Pandemic Jones, Paul, PJ, just want to shout you out, send you some love, and let you know that I swear to God, I'm gonna get to that new Olivia Rodrigo music video. I know she's your favorite artist on the planet Earth, my friend. We will get there, but I just want to shout you out today, partly because, you know me, gotta link everyone to the topic of the video, and if anyone at Patreon could be the perfect next Peter Parker type, I think it's you. I look at your profile pic and I'm like, look at this guy, he looks sweet. Maybe he's a little unassuming. Maybe he's ready to let his hero side out after getting into some kind of radioactive spider incident or whatever. You know, you could be like a big rat or something, or whatever you want. Pick your power, but save some lives out there, buddy.
Spider-Man or a big rat, according to your profile pic.
That was just off the top. I mean, you could be a male model based off your profile.
Nice
pic,
save.
All right. This is the most continuity any shout-out's ever had. Love you, buddy.